So Peter, it was about 6 years ago, and I was giving a talk in Slovakia where I'm from as well, by chance, and you came to me and you told me you are having this company, you started. Slido was a company which started at a hackathon, by the way, which not many successful companies do, and you were very, very early, and today, 6 years later, you have been at 400,000 conferences. Tell me, why did you want to start a company in this space, and what was the original idea of the company?
So I met Marian like 6 years ago, and actually that was the first startup grind you were doing, right? And you started.
It was before I was doing startup.
It was before you were doing startup grind. So we actually started Slido during the startup weekend in Bratislava, and we didn't want to start a company. I was working for Google at the time, and I was teaching at a university. And the original idea was, as I was teaching, I wanted my classes to be better, so I was giving my students like a small pieces of paper where they could give me feedback. And a colleague of mine from Google, he did a guest lecture for my students, and he told me, I gave him the feedback afterwards, it was great, and he told me, like, why do you use paper for that? Like, just build an app, you work for Google, right? So we thought, like, okay, this is something that could also help other teachers, so let's just build a simple app that other teachers could use to get better with their lectures. So we went to Startup Weekend, I met my two co-founders there, and all three of us were at the stage of our life where we were thinking like we would love to time, and we were like, okay, let's just try a few more months of this, and that's how the story started.
Okay, so you started
a presentation, lecture, meeting like this one, but the original implementation was like instant feedback after the lecture. So originally we would have a discussion here without you guys having any chance to ask us a question, and the first 3 months were really about searching for who liked the feedback idea, but they told us like the feedback is cool, but what if people could also ask questions at the conference? Could you build that for us? And then a new app that they built, and she was a terrible public speaker, like really, really bad. And we were sitting there, and it was going really. So when she finished after 30 minutes of torture, she looked at the screen and she's like, "Oh, I have some questions," and people are like, "No," or the white flags, like this and that. But actually, what happened is like she was a bad public speaker, but she was a really good expert. So she started answering those questions, and she started giving really interesting answers. So people started asking more questions, and in the end, it was like a 15-minute Q&A. It was probably one of the best parts of the whole conference. It was actually really, really interesting, and we realized that we can help presentations and people much more by improving the real time.
Yes, that's a good feedback. So the first company was it was called Instant Feedback. Then you changed the name.
Instant Feedback.
Okay, then change the name to Instando.
Instando.
How many domains did you buy until you landed on the last one?
So as you can imagine, I knew I needed something very, very short and powerful. So it took me 76 domains until I landed on Slido. And it wasn't actually Slido.com, it wasn't free at the time, it was Slido.do. As you can see, we just rebranded it a while ago.
So DO means they had to buy the domains from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, so the only reason why it was still available, because the only way you can buy a domain from the Dominican Republic is through the official host.do registrant, and no one was kind of buying through it. And even it took me like 1 day to buy the domain, but it was December 27th when I finally found the domain, the Slido domain. And I knew like, okay, this is it, this is the brand.
Okay, and then you had to think about whether you should buy the .com domain or not. We have some entrepreneurs in the room. I'm sure many of you are thinking about which domain you should buy. Is it .io? Is it .co.com? Why did you finally end up in buying a .com domain?
You can start with this domain. I think Slido.io was perfectly fine at the beginning. .io is perfectly fine as well. .co and so on. But at certain stage, like once the company starts, like once you know you have a company, once like you start having at least some traction, you know that if you don't buy the .com domain, like it's a huge liability. So we knew we had to buy it. It was actually a funny story because it was owned by the president of the German police, and he somehow wanted for us.
In a city,
in Cologne, and he just wanted to kind of for his, some pet project, so he didn't want to sell it. He had the price 5,000 euros, that was his price. So we were trying to, we didn't have the money, we were bootstrapped, so we offered him design services, we offered him to coding something, but he was like, oh, 5,000 or nothing. So it took us, I think, 2.5 years until we decided, like, okay, let's buy it from him.
Okay, so
5,000.
then the domain was sorted after 76 other domains. You have the company, and let's talk about features, because the first part I like to talk about the product market fit, which is not easy. And you went through a big journey, and I remember when you told me first about Slido, I was not very impressed. It's true. I remember. It's true, and I told you some my opinion, and what impressed me is after the weekend you sent me an email with some improvements to my comments, and this impressed me because in the meantime I talked to maybe 6,000-7,000 founders, and really I'm convinced the great ones are great because they execute very fast, they deliver. And this is a question which I'm sure many founders are asking themselves, and there is not an obvious answer. Where do you keep pushing, and where do you find out, okay, this is not probably the right way, it's dead end, you have to switch and pivot into something new. So at the beginning you started with getting attendees to give feedback about the conferences, and then you listen to the customers, which is a great thing. And one of the comments was, okay, why don't we offer attendees the option to ask questions? Where do you draw the line and know this is probably not the right way?
So actually, like, once we switched to the conference segment, we were super lucky that that was the early segment for us actually. Many people gave us the feedback like, you guys are pivoting too much and you should stick to like the original plan and so on, like you need to stick to the original plan. But for us what was really important was not the original idea, the original product, it was really the original mission, like why did we start Slido? And it was from the beginning about helping people get the most value out of joining that presentation meeting. So we knew like whatever we build that's contributing to this one, that's probably the right thing. And then you just like really try to talk to customers, be there with them. Why I said the conferences was a great segment for us, because it forced us, with the first customers, it forced us to actually be there in person, manage Slido for them, to actually see all the pains and see the whole experience, like really feel it yourself, and that gives you incredible insights.
Okay.
The struggle with the instant feedback was that the speakers, they didn't want us at the presentation, right? So you had no idea what happened there. But in the first dozens of conferences, I was there every time. I was sitting in a row, I was managing Slido or helping someone manage Slido, and those insights that you learn by actually really using your tool are just priceless, and you knew exactly what you have to do.
So I like Slido because Slido is an opportunity for people who are not always extroverts. Some people are introverts, they don't want to raise their hand and stand up and speak in front of lots of people. They can conveniently go and ask questions. By the way, you can do it as well. If you go to the link, slido.com, you can just ask a question. And I promise the top questions will be answered, we'll answer them. So feel free to keep asking if there's something which you think we should ask, Peter, we'll answer that. And so you have these options, and you listen to a customer's feedback, and I'm sure you got lots of options of what to add into the product. Tell us about how you're adding features to the product and what actually ended up being there today.
So, yes, like the conference is obviously like they had a lot of needs, right? Like as you know, like if you go to any conference right now, you download the mobile app, and there's like just so many things in there. So all of those things, we received that feedback, and we actually built quite a few of them. So after the first year, we had like really good agenda, we had networking, we had like sponsors, we had like so many different features, because we wanted to make sure kind of that some of the clients, like especially the big names, they would be using us. So we were running like a conference for SAP in Bratislava, and they gave us like, okay, if you do these 3 things for us, we will use you. So really at the beginning we were a little bit more opportunistic, but afterwards you see like which of those features are really bringing value, which of those are really helping the attendees, and which of those are actually just creating like a visual smoke, visual mess for people, so they can't like really use the tool properly. And in the end, it ended up like we removed quite a few
which features are smoke, and which had you removed?
So we removed basically everything that's not connected with real-time interaction. So Slido, so for example, we still have the agenda, like some people use it, but we removed the networking. We removed like you could have like files in Slido. You could have like Twitter and show like I think Facebook comments on Slido and so on. Like you had different things which were interesting for the conferences use case, but were not really helping the
I understand. I give one example. About 4 years ago, we hosted here in London all 3 founders of Eventbrite. How many of you do not know Eventbrite? Raise your hand. Everyone knows. And so we had all 3 founders, and we had Kevin and Julia, who is now the CEO. And I remember you there, and that's where you met Kevin, the CEO, and he's today, by the way, your mentor, right? Your advisor. And Kevin, he's a great guy because as an angel, he invested in about 5 unicorns, big companies like Airbnb and so on, at the seed stage. And I remember when we were talking to them, Julia, who is now the CEO, said, I love this, what is this product? This Slido is amazing. So they immediately knew the value of that. And I remember soon after you charmed them with Slido, and you managed to convince them to do a partnership with Slido and integration. Tell us about the experience and where is it today?
So actually, like they were just launching a platform for other tools to build on top of them. So it's not that they build an integration with us; we build an integration with them. And to be honest, instead of it being a success story, I think it was actually one of our fails. Like many failures that we did during those 6-7 years. And the reason was like Eventbrite was huge already at the time. We loved the product, we loved the founders, we loved their story. We wanted to build an integration, and that's the wrong motivation to build it because we didn't have a clear problem that the integration would solve. So we actually ended up building an integration which was not like, it was cool, it worked. When we showed it to people, they were like, oh, this is cool.
Why did you do it?
We did it because we thought Eventbrite could be a good kind of growth channel for us. So it was not for the right reason.
And it wasn't.
The way we built it, it wasn't. Maybe there is a different way we could build it that would be more useful for the users. But the way we built the integration, we thought like, okay, let's just build an integration that would be cool and interesting, but it was not in the right time. Like when you're creating an event, you're not yet thinking about live interaction. And when you're doing live interaction, the event is already created and you have no reason to go back to Eventbrite for that. So there was no kind of clear user journey that you could add value to. So it was a big fail on our side, and we learned from that whenever we do integration with partners like that, so we built integration with Slack, we have integration with Google Slides now and so on, we always focus like, okay, what is really the value that this integration can bring on top of using the two tools separately.
Okay, what is your most successful integration today?
It's probably still Slack, but the Google Slides one we released like a few months ago. That's growing the fastest. That allows you, if you use Google Slides, it allows you to basically insert a slide directly from the Google Slides. So you don't even have to leave Google Slides at all. You can really just add the Slido polls, questions directly from there, and that's what we want to achieve. Like for you, the experience is so seamless that you almost forget you use two tools.
Okay, I agree. This is one of the very important points in terms of you do something, you need to really quickly look into how successful it is, and if it's not, you have to think about is it worth having in there, and it's gonna mess up the code, it's gonna defocus the company. And great founders, every time they add a feature, you should think about removing one feature. And this is something which I noticed at Slido that they do it, and because if you don't do it, the focus will be lost. And that's why I like Slido, because this is something useful. Now, we have a question here from T-Dog. How did you acquire early customers? But before we do that, let's talk about first, what is product market fit mean to you? Tell us your opinion.
So, product market fit is really like when your product is solving a real need for users. That's really what it's all about. And many people argue about it, and probably, how many of you know Superhuman, the email kind of tool? So it's pretty popular right now, and the founder of Superhuman wrote a really nice kind of blog post about how they were searching for the product market fit. And there's this nice proxy, because once you have it, you know it. Everyone tells you, like, once you have product market fit, you start growing like crazy, you have it. But how do you find it? That's the really tough question, right? So what they did, they've been building Superhuman for 2.5 years, and what they did is they were asking the early users, like, how disappointed would you be if there would be no Superhuman? And they had 3 options: very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, and not disappointed at all. And the product market fit kind of proxies, if you have 40% of people saying they will be very disappointed, that means that you are hitting that kind of product market fit threshold. And we've been actually using it for the Google Slides integration. It's a pretty good North Star for the team on which to iterate.
That's a very good answer. What I noticed in many startups, they try to run before they can walk. And it's usually always coming to bite them at the back later on. And I can tell you when you don't have it. So for example, when many startups, they want to raise funding and spend a big chunk of that on marketing, on Google ads and Facebook ads. And what happens is they spend, let's say, $2 or $5 on getting a customer, but that customer brings them only $3 at the lifetime value. And this is a way of throwing money out the window, not growing organically because you're losing the money. But once you have product market fit, then each new customer can bring you other new customers organically because they are happy with the product, they love it. So then you kind of have the growth curve where you can start running.
And if I can add to that one, like actually product market fit is not like a universal piece. Like it's not like you have it, then you have it. Like actually for us, we had it once we kind of found it with the Q&A and the polling, like live interaction. There were certain types of events that it was product market fit right away. It was perfect. But for example, from the beginning, like we had some goals, like let's say being used by Southwest or being used by World Economic Forum, like those really big conferences. And we thought like we have a product market fit. We were totally wrong.
Because when you feel you have it, at which point?
So product market fit, you have to recognize that there are different groups, different segments of customers. And if you have a large conference, you have different needs than a small one, right? So just because you have a product market fit for, let's say, like an easy, like a small, medium business, doesn't mean you have a product market fit for like a large enterprise. And that was a big lesson for us as well. Like the enterprises, even though the product would solve their need within the meeting, they need so much more around the product to be even able to use it, that unless you have this, you don't have the product market fit. And we almost failed with some of those clients that we really wish that we fought so hard to get. Okay. We almost failed because we didn't know some of those pitfalls.
Great. So next question, the one I already mentioned from T-Log. How did you acquire the early customers? Let's discuss first the free ones, and then let's go to the paid ones.
Yeah, so Slido is a freemium model, so anyone can come to Slido and start using the basic version. And for us, it's like a live interaction, like the ability for people to ask questions should be almost like a basic human right. So we don't ever want to charge for that. But obviously you need to survive somehow, so we have like the paid versions that clearly distinguish customers. And in the beginning, it was pure hustling, just pure hustling. Like that's how you get the first customers. Like you have to like just go there, even offer it to them for free. Try to really convince guys like Marianne, reply to them after weekend, like, yeah, we fixed the crazy idea you had.
You fixed it, it was impressive, but was okay. But then I used it at our events, and at the first ever startup event here in London, we had the founder of Highball, which at the time like a world's famous company, and I was really surprised that over half of the audience used Slido. And then I called Peter and told him, hey Peter, if you give it to us for free, to start for free for life, I'm going to tell all of my other directors to use that. And you agreed, kindly. And maybe you would do it today, but at the time you did. Yeah. And literally the next month, Slido was on 3 other continents. In Australia, in Africa, and in South America, due to Sarah. And I was okay with the product, but I saw the audience loving it because it gives the power to the audience to ask questions and have them answered, so that's why I like it. But you told me earlier that you have one of the biggest missions at the beginning is you wanted to be where the customers are. And how did you do it, and how did you convert them into your paying customers?
Yeah. So this is like a really critical thing. Like if you want to build the best product, you need to be there where the best customers actually are. So if we wanted to get South by Southwest, we had to go to the US, right? And so the story of Slido was really great that we started in Bratislava, like in our hometown, where we had the connections, where we could kind of hustle or convince some people to be crazy enough and use this really unproven product, and that's how we were able to really learn like what to build, and how we were able to kind of build something that we were quite confident about. And after a year, where we were quite confident with the product, it was being used around Europe already, we were like, okay, let's conquer London. So that was the first kind of base, and then my co-founder Peter, he actually came here with a sleeping bag, and the original plan was like he will come here for 3 months, I think, and he will conquer London.
So what was the budget for conquering London?
A Ryanair ticket, and he was literally sleeping in a sleeping bag at the floor in one of our friends' houses, and he slept there for 2 years.
So what's the total budget to conquer UK?
So obviously it increased significantly. Like the key moment in the UK kind of expansion was actually an industry conference a few months after Peter came here, where we had like almost zero traction. He was getting pretty depressed. But there was an industry conference, and we had like I think 20,000 or 30,000 in the bank at the time, and the sponsorship cost like 5,000. And we were like, okay, are we going to bet like 20% of the company on this one conference? So we did. It was the best thing we could do. Like we went there, and literally like a week before, there was one guy that Peter met, like a professor that Peter met here in London. He was a professor of event management. And he wrote, after he met Peter, he was really excited about the tool, so he wrote an article about like how audience, always when they ask questions through the hands, like how it's really not the most efficient. And the next day, the CEO of the venue where the conference was happening wrote him like, oh, this was such a good article, I totally agree. So he connected us with the CEO, and we met him the day before the conference, and he actually gave us a pretty big shout out during the conference. And before the shout out, there was no one at our stand. After the shout out, there was like a huge line of people like at our stand, and that was like really the big kind of aha moment where we started having the first few customers here, and then the brand, the trust.
So that's the UK. Let's go quickly about the South by Southwest, because obviously the biggest customers here are, World Economic Forum, South by Southwest. How do you get South by Southwest as a customer?
So South by Southwest was always for us like, it wasn't so much about, for us it was a proof like if we can really handle South by Southwest, if this conference, which like 6 years ago was the mecca for startups, if we can get there, if they will use us, that's like the ultimate testimonial that the product is really good. So for us, it was almost like, proof that the product works. So at the beginning, it was my first trip to San Francisco. Actually, I went to the Startup Grand Global Conference there. I had 0 meetings scheduled. I really went blindly, and I knew like, okay, I need to hustle there. I need to build some connections. I met like 2 people, I think. Well, 2 potential clients. I don't know if I closed any at the time. But I was super lucky that I went to San Diego, and there was a small local pitching event. So I just pitched Slido, and a lady came to me afterwards. She told me like, well, this is so cool, like I have a session with South by Southwest, can I use it there? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I was supposed to fly actually back home to Bratislava like a week before the South by Southwest, so I was thinking like, should I rebook my tickets? Should I spend like another 10% of my company money to actually buy a ticket to South by Southwest and buy accommodation? It was super expensive at the time, and go there. And I asked her like, when do you have the session? And she said like the last day of South by Southwest. I'm like, but I have a good friend who has a session with Tim Ferriss on the first day. I'm like, oh, you think she could use Slido? And she was like, oh, let me connect you. So I called her like 20 times, and in the US, you leave voicemail. But I called and never, in Europe, you don't leave voicemail. So afterwards, she picked up, she's like, what's going on? What's happening? I'm like, don't worry, I'm this guy from Slido. And she's like, why are you calling me like this? But somehow, I don't know, like I was desperate. I convinced her to actually use Slido and South by. So when she agreed, I bought the ticket, I rebooked my flights, and I went there. And the goal was literally like, okay, I'm there. There are so many speakers who are tweeting about their sessions, they're asking for questions through Twitter. Let's just reach out to them, let's just get some more people use Slido to get the most out of it. And in the end, we ended up with 8 sessions using Slido. Actually, my favorite, one of my heroes, like David Allen, who wrote the Getting Things Done book, he was there. I literally just walked into the green room half an hour before the session, told him, like, David, you're my hero, can you use Slido? And he did. So that was the good story. There were also a lot of bad stories there, of course, when you hustle like this. But in the end, we had 8 sessions, and I knew, like, okay, we need to get there properly through official one. So then we sponsored this more event they did in Las Vegas. The education guys saw us, they loved Slido, they started using Slido themselves as you, and then 3 years later, finally, we
okay, well, that's how we get good customers. I want to talk to you about some near-death experiences. But before that, I want to ask a question to our audience. Let's go to a simple, let's switch it in Slido. And what we want to ask you is, what do you think is the most popular use case of Slido? And what is the key reason why people use it? Is it either trainings or lectures? Is it conferences? Is it meetups or all hands meetings? Please let us know. Okay, so the most popular answer is conferences. Peter, what is the answer?
Lauren? So actually it's all hands meetings now. So conferences was definitely the first big segment that started using Slido, but as people use Slido at the conferences, they enjoy the usage, they saw opportunity to use it also with their companies. So all hands meetings nowadays is actually the biggest we can close the loading.
Okay, so it's all hands meetings now. Peter, tell us about in the life of the startup there always or any company there always situations where you have crisis and you need to get out. Tell us about one or two cases where the company was in trouble and we didn't know what to do.
Yeah, so actually I have a pretty cool story about the all hands meetings if you want later on. Later on. But so there will be, like if you are starting your company, there will be a lot of near-death moments, and probably like the two really worth mentioning are always when the product doesn't work, when it really should work, right? And one of those near-death moments was, it was a half year after we started, one of kind of the big conference organizers in Slovakia started using Slido, and they actually used it at their kind of flagship conference in Barcelona. So I went there personally, everything was ready, everything was set up. I went on stage and I told like a room full of bankers from all around Europe, like guys, go to Slido.com, enter this hashtag, it's gonna be great. And they were like, Slido's not working. I'm like, oh, so the Wi-Fi is down? No, the other website worked, Slido's not working. I'm like, okay, give me a moment. And so I, obviously we didn't use Slido for that first session. I messaged our CTO. He was like, oh, Slido works, of course it works. So I went back on stage for the second session, the same thing happened. The organizer was not happy at all. And it turned out that we as you're starting, of course you're trying to release very fast, and we introduced a stupid bug, when 5 people joined Slido, it crashed, like literally, it could handle 5 people. So when we tested 2 of us, that's the problem with 3 founders, like when you test, it works. A few more people killed it. So there was a 2-day conference, and I knew that we messed up like really badly. This was like a big conference organized in Slovakia who we were counting on to have like a lot of events. And there was an event in London, our first event in London, that was supposed to use Slido that evening. And I messaged our CTO, okay, we need to fix that. Or should I write it that please don't use Slido? So I went to walk on the park, and in the meantime he was trying to fix it. So I came back 1 hour before the event in London, and I messaged him, like, okay, is it working? And he's like, it should. I'm like, really? He told me like 5 times today, it's working. No, it should. Okay, so I didn't message them. They used it really well. It was actually Tech Hub demo day, the first one they used Slido here in London, and it worked really well. I messaged the organizer, she was like, oh, it was great success. I'm like, okay, so it probably works now. So the second day, and I knew that, okay, if the next day, I have 2 choices. I either walk on the stage for the 3rd time and look like a complete idiot in front of all these people, or the company is dead. Like, if you lose this client, we will be done. So it wasn't easy, but I walked on the stage, and thankfully there were not everyone was in the room the first day, so some people joined, and there was this really great speaker from HSBC speaking, and he had a great presentation with several like really great polls that added tremendous value to the presentation. So it was a great use case. More and more people started using Slido, and in the end, like the usage was a great success, but cool. it was really near that experience.
Yes, Peter, we have 5 minutes left, so let's squeeze out the maximum value out of you. Quick questions. How did you fund the company in the early days? Quick answer.
My money. So savings from my previous job.
So you didn't pay your employees?
We pay ourselves like €500 a month.
Just the co-founders.
Just the co-founders.
And how long did you go just co-founders and not hire people?
1 year.
To work with?
1 year. And then after 1 year, we raised like the 30,000.
300,000.
First the 30,000
Okay.
from angel investors. That's where we hired the other 3 co-founders also for €500 a month. I don't know how we convinced them, but they joined. That was Peter with the sleeping bag.
Yes.
So he joined on €500.
And you had the sleeping bag or he had to buy it himself?
He had to buy it himself. Cost his computer.
Okay, did you have some equity?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so he's a happy guy now.
We'll see.
He's
What
getting happy.
happens, right?
Cool, so that's a good answer. Oh, what are your biggest competitors and what makes Slido better than them? Without promoting Slido too much, what do you think the customers think?
So, like there are very few companies that do exactly what you try to do, but there are some companies like Mentimeter is a great one for speakers, Kahoot is, let's say, for quizzes, which is like everyone is doing a little bit different things than we do, but there are some good companies out there. But what we are trying to do is like provide that one really simple experience for our attendees. Like you join Slido, you enter the code, and everything else should be happening for you in real time. Like you don't need to think, and that kind of simplicity, like removing all those barriers for the attendees. That's our mission. Like, how can you remove those barriers for the conversation?
Yes. So, example, which happened like half an hour ago or 40 minutes ago, we were in the back talking to Kenneth from Real Labs, and we just told him what you do, and his immediate reaction was, "This is pretty cool. We should be using it." Like, you don't have to sell if the product is so cool or so. It provides so much value that people instantly think we should be using it without you have to push too hard. That's why you find you're already there with the product market fit, and it works.
And this is kind of one of the big mantras from the beginning of Slido was like, just focus on the success of your customers and the rest will follow. So don't focus on money, don't focus on all these metrics, everything, just really focus on making the experience of the customers great.
Yes.
And especially because people can see Slido being used, that's how they learn about Slido. So for us, it's even double important.
Yes. So Slido is a company which now has how many employees?
150.
And 2 years ago, how many did you have?
90?
19. And 3 years ago?
45.
45. So you're going very fast. And you admitted confidentially that you made some mistakes in your sales and in your objectives for sales. What went wrong and how do you adjust it?
So actually, like, we didn't have sales team for the first 6 years. We only like officially admitted that we had a sales team almost like a year ago. And before that, like, really our North Star metric from the beginning was like number of successful events. So that was like the right metric to focus on. Like, how many people did you help to have a successful event? And that was really steering us in the right direction. And that was also the main metric for our salespeople. But once we kind of recognized their sales team, we gave them like the revenue metric. And it's not necessarily bad, like they need to of course have a revenue metric, but at the same time they need to still keep in mind like why we're doing this. Like a salesperson should really just help a client go through the buying process to be able to use the tool and have successful events, right? That's the main mission, main goal of the salespeople. And if they do a great job, they will earn a lot of revenue, right? So you need to make sure that they always understand the ultimate goal, like why they are actually in the company, why they're doing the job. It's not just about money.
Okay. The very, very important point you made to me that you said what you are now, when I asked you what do you worry about today, you told me you worry about how to make sure Slido will still be here in 2 or 3 years from now. Can you please elaborate on that and explain to us what you mean and how do you make sure Slido will survive in 3 years from now?
Sure. So I use this metaphor. When you start a company, it's almost like when you are trying to get with a plane and fly with a plane and the runway is really fast approaching, and that's when you're kind of worrying about surviving the next month, the next 1 or 2 months, right? And then once you kind of successfully, take off, and then you hit the altitude and you're somehow cruising, like then the horizon is of course much longer because you have some cadence, you have some brand, you have some customers coming in. Most of our customers are inbound, like coming in organically, so we don't need to kind of push for that. So we have probably some time, but especially in this industry, like things are going to change so fast that you need to always be looking like, okay, how could we innovate? How can we change things? How can we always stay at the edge? And it's so easy, like especially if you grow so fast and if you add a lot of customers and 150 people, like you're solving so many problems that are like internal or customer problems and so on that you didn't have to solve before, that it's easy to almost forget innovating. You have so many requests from customers you need to solve and so on, right? So making sure that you hit this balance right, that you still have the operational excellence, that you still kind of are able to be operationally well, solve the problems of the customers, but at the same time leave enough space and creativity for innovation. I think that's a huge challenge, and we're definitely like trying to find our way around it.
It's a very important point. Let's go to two more questions very quickly. Do you feel your success would have happened if you, even if you did not come from a technical background?
I did not. I don't have a technical background.
Exactly. So, so where is the success coming from then?
So we were very lucky that actually on the three co-founders, we had the kind of so-called golden triangle: the developer, the designer, and me, the hustler. And that's what it is.
Okay, so I think the funding question we already answered. How did you use the funds when you raised it? What did you spend it on?
Oh my god, so stupid. Like, I remember exactly when I received the money, I felt like, okay, we're growing this fast without the money, we now have to grow like twice as fast. And I need to start doing all those things with the money. So stupid. Like, don't do it, please. So I wasted 20% of the money in the first 3 months.
On what?
You don't even want to know, like, completely.
I want to know.
I hired a super expensive person, like potential head of sales in US, in San Francisco. Like, what was I thinking? We spent money on like online ads, like really. We bought some sponsorships, like really stupid. And then I realized, like, okay, if we keep this way, we're gonna go bankrupt in a few months. Okay. And I realized, okay, we need to go back to what we were doing and just make sure the money allows us to kind of replicate that.
That's the results. Cool. Last one is, do you ever find that having a live list of questions behind the speakers distract the audience from the talk? That's a good question.
It's a great question, and there are some events that don't like to display the questions, and I think it really depends on the audience members. This gives you much more kind of transparency into what other people are asking, and you trust the process much more if you see them. But yes, there are some people who are maybe a little bit more visual who might struggle with it a little bit. So yes, majority of people benefit. Some people might be a little distracted by that. So maybe having it a little bit more on the side would be a bit better.
Okay, so on this note, please join me in thanking Peter Komarnik from Slido. Now we're going to have a talk about investing with Hussein Kanji from Hoxton Ventures and with Kenneth Cyber. Guys, please come to the front. Peter, please don't go anywhere. I'm going to ask you towards the end for 3 tips about networking, because you've been to probably more conferences than all of us combined. So now, please, without any further ado, join me in welcoming Hussein Kanji, partner of Hoxton Ventures. Hussein, hi. And Silver from Real Times.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Well, so let's see where we begin. So Hussein and I was sitting and chatting back there a little bit. And I think what might be an interesting place to start is to just tell people a little bit about how you created, Hoxton Ventures and where you came from, and why you just thought that, starting a VC fund would be the next interesting thing you should do with your life.
I didn't know any better. So I'm American. I moved here about 14 years ago. I joined a big venture fund here in London, Axel. I spent a few years with them, and then I left Axel, and I saw that there were many more companies being started in the UK, and there wasn't that much in the way of money. Most of my friends had spun off and kind of done their own funds in the US. And foolishly, I thought I should go do the same thing. Building a fund is kind of like building a startup, but it's significantly harder to get off the ground because people who give you money aren't really used to writing a check to a brand new concept. They look at historical track record, usually multiple decades of historical track record, so they don't behave like venture capitalists. If I knew that it was going to be this hard, I wouldn't have done it. I would have just ended up joining another firm. I didn't know. I thought it would take maybe 12 months if I was really good, because that's about how long it takes. Maybe 24 months if I wasn't so good. So realistically, probably 18 months. It took 39 months to get the fund off the ground. At month 24, I'd given myself enough runway to not have to worry, but you get told this thing about sunk cost, which is, sunk cost is sunk cost, right? It doesn't come back. You say you should walk away when something is sunk. But you don't want to fail, so at 24 months you find a way to give yourself another year, which is what we did. So now it was 36 months and we still weren't done. And at this point you really don't want to fail because it looks really embarrassing. So you kind of persist, and eventually enough people took pity on us and we got funded and we got going. So that was kind of our story.
So I think many of you may not know, but Hussein is also a very successful startup founder before starting Hoxton. So why not carry on starting companies? Why go to investing? And following on from that, do you think you make a better investor because you were a startup founder, or does it not matter?
So I wouldn't describe it as very successful. I would just say a startup founder. So number one was a tiny company. It was an agency. We sold it for $6 million. It was cool because I was 18 years old, but it wasn't a particularly successful company. Number two,
it's got a high bar for success.
So number two, I did two things. I bought a whole basket of tech stocks in the dot-com bubble, and so in 2000 or 2001, whenever the dot-com bubble collapsed, all that money disappeared. And I took the rest of the money and I founded a second company with my own money, and that company collapsed and went to zero as well, largely because of the dot-com bubble. So I lost all of the money from number one. I had this trade-off. I had this brilliant idea of buying like a Range Rover and then driving the Silk Route. That would have made me more money than if I'd done that than all the other stupid stuff I did in the stock market plus the second startup. Then I had to get a job, so I joined one of my advisors' companies. And that company raised $35 million on his track record and then spent $35 million and let it collapse, but it got rescued and got sold to Comcast for 10. So I don't think that was a successful company. And then one of the angel investors in that company and I teamed up and we created a company. We bought out all the intellectual property and we sold that business about 2 years later for $135 million. So I made a little bit of money back. And then I went to go work for Microsoft for a few years, and then I joined this venture fund, and I liked the venture side. And then I think once you join the venture side, you become fundamentally broken as a founder because you no longer do real work. All you do is drink coffee all day and go to meetings, and you have no value add anymore back. So if you flunk out of a venture firm, which is kind of what I did with Axel, then you have to go figure out how to join another venture fund. Nobody will hire you in venture, or create your own venture fund. So out of kind of pure necessity, Hoxton had to be created so I could stay in the industry. And I do think it helps to go through the journey of being a founder because you largely learn all the dumb stuff that you're not supposed to do and you have a little bit of empathy. But most of investing is very different than being a founder. Most founders who end up becoming investors don't like it because you go from this world where you're very active, you get to shape, influence, hire, create things, to this world that's really passive, right? And you write a check, you kind of turn up every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, every quarter to something, and either it kind of goes right and you don't really know, your information flow is kind of secondhand because the founder that you invested in and the people who are telling you what's going on in the business, you don't have real-time information, you have no control, no influence, you can maybe nudge, you basically figure out how to say one interesting thing over the course of the year, and hopefully that thing sticks, because if you say 2 or 3 things, it doesn't stick because they start tuning you out. Nobody wants a boss, right? So an investor's not a boss. So it's a very different world. And then, like I said, and then you train yourself to largely figure out ways to say no to people, which means that you have zero optimism, zero naivete. You have no ability to do anything because, like, most of life is going to make stuff that's hard and make it possible. And you basically find 1,000 reasons why the impossible is really impossible. And so you're fundamentally broken in any other way except to invest. It's a very difficult job to transition out of.
No, I think I was very impressed to hear how, Hussein has taken this approach to investing, because we were talking before, and I used to do some investing as well, but I hadn't reached the level of maturity that you had, so I wanted to invest in people that I could help, But these were fundamentally also people who were arrogant founders like myself who didn't want to be helped. So it's a great cocktail of people who really needed the help but didn't want it, and all those investments failed miserably until my wife pulled the plug and took my bank account away from me. Now I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, the fortunate part is they say it takes like $30 million to train a venture capitalist, kind of the same amount it costs to train a fighter pilot, because a fighter pilot will put the plane down at some point in their career. The venture investor will just spend money really foolishly. I'm really, really, really grateful to my old firm for letting me do that with their money versus ours. And so I do think that's kind of the job, and you can't, if you want to help, which I think is a very natural instinct on anyone who's ever built a company before, you find that if you try and pick companies that need help, you pick broken companies. The whole job of this investing is to pick people who are going to be super successful, and you have to train yourself to literally be the dumbest person in the room, because if there's any inkling that you think you're smarter than the people that you're investing in, like, why are you writing that check? Your knowledge of the industry should be worse than theirs. It should be good enough for you to be able to confidently write the check, but you should be in the situation where you may be wiser than them because you've seen the movie before, but you should be dumber than them. And it's a most jobs don't train you to be dumb. Like, it's just not the kind of way the rest of the world kind of works. So this venture industry is like very quirky.
Just as a raise of hands, how many of the people out there are currently running a startup? Oh, a lot. So before we go to some of the questions behind as well, I think it might be interesting to ask you, what's the best way to approach an investor if you want to get in touch with them? Do you read obviously on Hoxton, you've got I'm sure there's a way to get in touch with you just by email. Is that something you read because you must get thousands, or do people somehow have to come and tackle you outside the office or get a recommendation? What's the way that kind of gets people to the door?
We're pretty open. I mean, we do read the emails that come through. We don't necessarily read them with as much frequency as we do, so it's when we have downtime that we actually read the stuff that goes to business plans. You'd be surprised at the kind of, I can read out some of the emails that I get, and some of them are really random, really random. They have nothing to do with tech investing. I don't know why they're emailing us. So there's a lot of noise in that inbox. We will look at it, but you have to kind of get past the noise. And the easiest way is, this is an industry where a lot of social engineering, I think, is required on the part of founders. To be fair, we have to do the same kind of social engineering when we're raising money from LPs. It helps to come in via reference from someone who we already trust. It makes the process much more efficient. It's not a requirement. I mean, we'll look at stuff all the time from all kinds of people. One of the things about being a new firm is, it's not like you're sitting at the top of the pyramid. So you do the work to go figure out if you want to do something or not. But I do think as a founder, you try and engineer, like, at least socially, how to make sure. Remember, this is an industry. I mean, you can see it like with things like in the scooter industry. Like, just look at how many scooter companies got funded. This is an industry largely of lemmings who have no capability of independent thought. And so they look at social signals and they look at what their peers do. So, like, if someone thinks like Sequoia is thinking about funding you, I can guarantee you're going to be in a ton of partnership conversations with all the people who kind of want to be Sequoia when they grow up. Not everyone's capable of doing that much independent thought.
I think that leads to probably an interesting thing as well for people. What are your investment criteria if you have any set ones? Well, what are you looking for when a company walks through the door?
Yeah, so it's really simple, and it's also spelled out on our website. So we largely believe the world is mostly efficient and kind of works well. And lots of things can be improved, but you can't really make a ton of money on improving things. So we look for stuff where there are brand new markets being formed, where there's a reason why that company that's being born, and it's usually not just the one company, it's the industry, so there are multiple companies kind of being born. There's a reason why something is being born. It could be like an underlying technical change, it could be a regulatory change. It's some kind of catalyst that allows the industry to get born. We think a lot of those kinds of companies that get funded when these new industries are born, there's like a bunch of them, and it's kind of like the blind man and the elephant. Nobody really knows what the shape of the industry is, but usually one or two kind of emerge as the winner. Usually the vast majority of those end up being born in the US and emerge as the winner, so it's the American one that emerges as a winner, but once in a while the European one emerges as a winner, and we mostly invest in Europe, or pretty much exclusively invest in Europe. So when we think the European one has a shot at becoming the market leader in that new emerging category, we like writing the check. That's it.
So I noticed the question behind, which is gone now, but also something we talked about, like what. So the question behind here was, which unicorn investment did you miss out on? Assuming anything came across your table, but you also linked to what's the investment that, like, with the value of hindsight, you wished you put the money down for?
Yeah, and that's easy. So we're like most other VCs, so pretty dumb. So we turned down UiPath like very early on, and the most bitter part about this is the next fund that did it was Axel, so my old firm gets the credit for it. So that makes it especially worse. And we met Daniel ages ago. We looked at it, my business partner looked at it. He writes code like actively. He does a lot of stuff in kind of headless Chrome. He's like, I can write scripts that do this thing. There's no technology here. He's dead wrong about this. And then we turned it down on that basis, and then we saw Axel do it. The company today is on track to do $400 million in revenue this year. It's a $70 billion company. They would have returned their fund over in multiples. Like it's a really painful mistake. It costs us more to do dumb stuff like that than it does to write a check and lose it all.
So there's a question behind here as well. So what are the key things that you personally look for in an investment deck? Are there any things that when you see that they jump out to you either in a positive or perhaps a negative way?
Yeah, I mean it's this idea of like a large brand new market that's being formed and some evidence of traction or product market fit or whatever you call it, and it's hard to there's not a science to this, you kind of know it when you see it. It could be, we've done stuff, and I've done stuff on a sheet of paper, I've done stuff that's a little bit into revenue, and it really doesn't matter to me. The question is are the ingredients there, and is that market going to stick today? Because there are a bunch of markets that we take bets on where the market doesn't stick for like 3, 4, 5 years, and then the company runs out of cash in one form or another, and they have to sell it, unfortunately, in order to get out, because otherwise the alternative is the company goes bust. So we take a lot of this kind of market-centric risk. So evidence that the market's kind of clicked into place is the most important thing for us.
So when we think about markets, obviously market, you talked about scooter market a while ago, there's, that scooter companies will be around, on every corner. Are there any other markets at the moment where you look and you go, oh, not another X, Y, or Z, another scooter company, but what's the next big Highball or bubble?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes and goes and comes in waves. I mean, right now you're starting to see a bunch of companies that are doing stuff in like the dark kitchen, virtual kitchen, like restaurants as a service type business. Travis has one with cloud kitchens. There's an ex-Uber one that just got funded by Andreessen Horowitz. I mean, the most interesting company in that space was funded by Sequoia like 6 years ago, called Rebel Foods. It's kind of one of the bigger ones in India. It's not in Southeast Asia, so most people here don't hear about it. But usually these kinds of things, at the time the market gets born, nobody really wants to write the check. And then as the market it like clicks into place, lots of people want to throw money at the problem. And sometimes the late person can catch up and win, but usually the first person usually has the advantage in that business.
So the question here is, what was the company you sold for $6 million? I think people are curious about the £6 million company you sold when you were 18.
It wasn't even £6 million. It was $6 million. It was a web design agency. So we set up. So I interned when I was a freshman in college at a web design agency. We then a bunch of us kind of peeled off from there and set up our own agency. We did HP's first website. We did Apple's like proper first website. We did a bunch of like websites for people. It was back then in 1995. We wrote a book. It became a bestseller. And then about a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, KPMG bought that as well as like 3 or 4 other businesses and stitched them all together, and that kind of became their web development practice to respond to kind of client demands.
So I think 2 things we should also talk about. So one of the things which is and the guys who are out here, if assuming that people have a good idea and that you think team is actually pretty decent, that it's a business that could work, what are some of the most fatal mistakes you see founders make? Things where things go wrong when they could have actually gone right?
Yeah, so the biggest mistake that we see, and this is where I spend a lot of my cycles, like trying to make sure people don't make this mistake, is I think everyone probably understands what technical debt is in the room, which is if you are building something from scratch and you're going to do stuff in a hurried way, you end up kind of building this debt, and you have to go back to the technology stack and kind of go back and fix and patch the debt. I think in Europe especially, because Europe historically hasn't had that much money in the venture community, there is organizational debt that gets built in these companies, and it happens particularly around the time that our companies really should be hyper-scaling. So they don't build the bench of people that they need in order to really become a multi-billion-dollar company. We only play for like multi-billion-dollar type companies. We screw up all the time, so very few of our companies get there, but that's all we play for. And so right around the time that you think the company should be like really stepping on the gas and trying to like conquer the world, that's usually when you realize that the key people that you need in the organization who can kind of scale to that next level aren't there. So then you do a search trying to find those people. If you're really lucky, you can find that person sooner, but usually these searches take like 3 to 9 months, sometimes as much as a year. And then these people join the organization, so by the time they get productive and they're culturally imbued with the values of the firm, etc., it's another 3 to 6 months on top of that. So right at the time that you want to step on the gas, you basically end up in this position where you're basically stuck for a year treading water because you can't step on the gas because you don't have the ability to be able to do that. You don't have the kind of leadership team or the management team or the middle management layers in place. And a lot of this stuff usually comes because the companies are too poor to be able to invest in the people that they need to invest into. And you have to figure out, if I think this one's going to work, I kind of want to spend into the growth, ahead of the growth. I kind of want to invest into the team. And I would say the vast majority of people in Europe screw this thing up. And it's one of the reasons I think we don't see very many successful companies come out of Europe, because when they have the potential, they kind of get stalled for about a year. So people now know how to solve technical debt. I think organizational debt is still a little bit foreign, and I think you see a lot of venture people, particularly people with kind of a private equity bent to them or a finance bent, who don't want to over-invest into things. And the challenge with this is if you don't over-invest, you end up not being able to scale. And so if you're in a growth type of industry, you really do have to scale. I think if you have American venture firms in the cap table or on the board, this problem kind of goes away because they understand this, but the Europeans don't understand it nearly as much.
So there's another question which rose to the top, which I also asked you. You had an interesting answer, so we'll go with it. Do you have any red flags? Is there anything where if you think this company is fundamentally could scale, or you're convinced that it's an opportunity, is there anything that could make you go, no, here's a red flag, I won't invest?
There's the obvious red flags, like, the person committed fraud in the past, or, something that you wouldn't get excited about the business. And my feeling is if you get excited about the business, you really think it has a shot, why would you want to artificially limit your ability to pick a winner because A doesn't feel as right? Maybe the founder's like incredibly difficult, which happens. You know what? If you are convinced that they're going to be the market leader in the thing in the industry and they can scale, and that impediment's not going to stop them from scaling, well, who cares if they're difficult, right? It doesn't make that much of a difference. I mean, you might as well write the check than not write the check, because there's so few of those outlier type businesses in the world. You kind of want to be an investor. I'm always very puzzled by the folks who decide they're going to specialize in an industry or like really narrow down their constraint. There's so few of these things. Why do you want to make life harder for yourself? These things are rare. So when you do see something and the conditions are met, you really do think it's going to scale, write the check. The worst thing that happens is you lose your money. You're not going to lose any more than your money. And if it wins, you might get 100 times your money. The payoff is so asymmetric. You might as well write the check.
So another thing which we were talking about was, I've heard, and people out there may have heard the same or differently, that there was a lack of seed and pre-seed investment in at least the London market right now, and so the companies are trying to get to Series A much faster. And so there's a huge amount of money at A and B, but not much as seed. I think you've got a slightly different view of that.
Yeah, we haven't seen that. I think there's some data on this that we did recently, and there are roughly about 25 new funds that have been formed every year over the last 5 years in the UK. But that's the funds that have closed and announced. I think there's a ton of people investing. I used to keep a spreadsheet. It was like a communal spreadsheet that the venture people all kind of contributed to, all the new funds that we knew that were out in market. And that spreadsheet was 100 different lines in the spreadsheet. So there's all this money, and most of that money is people are forming funds, but they're not forming $100 million, $500 million funds. They're forming $10 million, $20 million, $30 million, $40 million type funds. And so the natural instinct for if you're managing $20 to $40 million bucks, the only thing you can afford to do is do seed investments. You can't do like Series A and Series B. You don't have the money to do it. So I think there's a ton of money out there in the seed stage. I think Series A is a little bit harder, but it's still pretty easy because there are a lot of new funds that have also been formed on that space. I think Series A like has revenue and you're doing 10 million ARR, you can run an auction and it's a beauty contest between who you want to pay as your investor. But I think if you're one of these things where like, give me 15 million bucks because it's still kind of conceptual, and once I have the 15 million bucks, then I will have a machine that looks like a financial model. You need kind of courage to write that check, and you need capital. And there are only 5 funds every year that are above 250 million that's raised. That includes all the incumbent funds. So there's not a big pool of like investors. If you assume everybody raises on every 4-year cycles, that's a pool of 20 investors. You know, your ratio in these kinds of things is like 1 in 20. And it's just not a big enough pool to be able to get that kind of check. So we see a lot of companies that could be potentially interesting, but aren't definitively interesting, really struggle at the Series B. And the other data point is like 70% of the Series Bs right now in Europe are being done by US funds. So that can tell you one thing, is the US funds are just amazing and seeing everything coming here, or it means nobody's doing anything, and the few deals that are getting done are being done by courageous people in the US don't really bother to spend that much time in Series in Europe to begin with.
So there's a few questions there, but I think one question which again probably is helpful to people is, do you have how do you value a company? Is it the fact that you always just look for a certain percentage of the company and then you just go, well, this is what you need and I'm going to take 20%? Or do you have any specific methodology of putting a value on the check you're going to write?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, generally speaking, at these kinds of stages, it's what I would call numerator-denominator economics. So there's a check that you're going to write into the company, and there's a percentage that you kind of want to own. You know, if you own like 1% of a company, it's not particularly interesting. You know, market can be anywhere from like 10, and unfortunately, in Europe is as high as like 30 for a founder. It's diluted, more expensive here. In the US, it's kind of low. The seed round is like 10 to 15%, and the Series A is like 20% or maybe 15 to 20%. But the numbers are higher on Europe because capital is more expensive here and there's not as much of it. And so that's numerator denominator, and then you sanity check the denominator, right? So if the denominator then is going to be a ridiculously big number, you gotta really think twice about it. And if the denominator is going to be ridiculously small, that's also kind of a bit of a red flag. But usually these things, you know, you're putting $2 million in, you're going to value it at like 10, right? You know, you work backwards, it roughly fits within the range. You know, to be quite honest, like whether a company's worth like 6 or 7 or 8, if it's going to become a big company, it really doesn't matter for either party. And that's part of the reason why you have valuation creep in the US, because that's what everyone's realized. In Europe, you find it's weird, you find a lot of rounds getting done at like $1 million or $2 million, and that makes no sense to me. That's I don't know, there's just less capital, and I don't think people are as good at shopping around for the right capital.
We are almost out of time, and if we don't leave in time, Marion will not invite us back, which we don't want to happen. The last question will be simple, yes or no. You can answer it in 1 second. Is that people said, did you bring your checkbook?
Yes.
Doesn't mean you're going to take it out.